Welcome back to Develop's podcast, Charge. I'm Louisa and with me is Maria Christina.
Hi there.
In this episode, we spoke to Joyeeta Das from Gyana.
Gyana is a big data AI platform that allows businesses to view macro trends against their sales data.
Joyeeta is also an outspoken proponent of gender equality in the workplace and increasing the number of women in tech.
So she shared with us her practical methods to encourage more women to apply to tech jobs.
And the ways in which she has observed diversity boosting team performance.
Joyeeta, thank you so much for joining us and welcome. So if you could tell us a little bit about your background and about Gyana, just to set us off.
Hi, it's exciting to be here. I am the CEO and founder of Gyana. Gyana is a big data / AI company. We have a platform that tells organizations what is driving their sales data from the outside. So macro factors like weather, footfall, social media, what could be impacting, and quantify that impact.
So could you explain to us what big data is exactly?
That's very exciting because I don't really think that big data is really a well-defined term or even needs to be. I know a lot of people take offense to that. They would like to nail it down and they're very offended by the fact that it has so many floating definitions. But look at the word cloud. It can mean a variety of things and that doesn't really hurt the industry. That's just how it is. So I think it's hard to nail down the exact definition of big data. I would like to stick to the basics, which is size. If it isn't that big, I don't call it big data. So if you're floating around with gigs and maybe a little bit up to a terabyte, it's still not completely a big data base for me. But I think there are many other definitions and they work in different contexts as well.
What does big data mean in the context of Gyana and what are you trying to do with it?
So we have a very interesting philosophy that we converted into tech a few years ago. We kind of thought that large quantities of data definitely hold insights, but I think we felt, all of us, that the exciting part of it is when you intersect it with many other kinds of data, and then what you get is holistic knowledge. We were beginning to feel that that's kind of lacking. We always look into one kind of data set and drill down vertically and try to get insights, but then it so happens that you completely miss out the context of it. That means the world, really. And the context can only come from other data sets that make meaning or give it relevance. So we thought that if there's got to be a big data set analysis, why don't we make a platform that combines many kinds of them and then gives you a holistic picture of what is driving what? So every decision you make on the basis of it, whether it's operations or sales or strategy, is a bit more holistic, a bit more integrating many other points of view. Something we greatly lack in the world right now.
Yeah.
So it's more of a horizontal sort of construction.
Absolutely.
I see.
Perfect. Yeah.
So you map out areas, is that correct?
So the system really has a representation of space and time within itself. But it doesn't do it in the mapped out way because it's many dimensions, right? So every time we add a data set, it adds that data set to the representation of that place. So it gets richer over time. But when the user accesses the system, it doesn't access all those complexities because that would be very difficult. What the user gets to access is things that you want to know out of a place, okay? So this is a place where I have 10 stores. Let's say London City. I have 15 stores here. I just want to know what's going on. So what the system does is it plugs in the transactional data of the stores into it and then quickly within seconds throws up trends like, you sold purple full-sleeve t-shirts on Sunday mornings because teenagers went to a rock concert nearby. Or you always sell baking goods on Wednesday evenings to a set of people who are talking about fluffy jumpers on social media. For some reason, it's the same set. So it starts drawing correlations between all the digital footprints of those large groups in that place. And then you get to see what is happening before and after. What's the moment of purchase? What does it mean? But to be honest, this could be applied to many other things. We started with sales data and insights, but you could do that with marketing data. You could do that with IoT. You could do it with many things. And hopefully in future, we'll do that.
So what gap do you think that Gyana fills in the market? What is, so you said it's sales purpose, right? Like sales oriented right now.
I think the gap that it really fills is a little bit more functional and business than just tech. So, by the end of 2018, we're going to be in shortage of 1 million data scientists. And that's because everyone is getting more and more data every day and you need to make sense of it and you need people who are specialized in it. And that's getting very hard to get. Data scientists are hard to recruit, hard to train. And it's relatively a newer field, application of AI and data sciences than any other kind. So we don't really have a deluge of graduates for the last 10 years waiting to fill the spots, right? So it's hard to do that. Now everyone is going to run into shortages, and they already are. So if you are a non-tech based organizations that tech isn't at the core of you, but you generate massive quantities of data, which is actually a lot of sectors if you think about it, what are you going to do to work with this, to make sense of it? And in the last 2 years, 90% of the world's data has been produced. That's the rate at which we are producing it. Every few months, the maximum part of the entire world's data is being produced in those months. That's how the moving average is shifting. It's in one day we are generating. By the time we were speaking, 4 million posts have been liked on Facebook, and 72 hours of YouTube content has been created. Really, that's insane. Now, how are you going to make sense of all of this in one place so that it makes sense for your business? And that's what it provides. Now, you can't go around hiring millions of data scientists in every sector every month from now on. What Gyana does is it takes the need of doing that far lesser, because it has all the data sets. It starts combining them. It gives you a basic level of insights. So about 60 to 70% of what you would do with it, with a data science team, is already done for you. Then you can use the decision making and the creative aspects of your job on top of the insights. So it doesn't really replace a job. So if you're a really good strategist or an analyst, it's not going to take that away from you. But what it'll do is it'll make you an analyst who now has a data scientist on a browser sitting in the cloud, really.
That's incredible. So would you still recommend that people go and become data scientists, even though you're...
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah?
I think a lot. I was reading the other day that 65% of people who are studying right now are going to work in jobs that are not yet invented. And I think many variations of it will be not just data science, but manipulations of data. It could be voice, it would be real-time video, all that. Because if you're going to digitize the world to this extent, there's got to be people sitting at the back of it making sense of what's happening to the digitization and what's the output of it. Let me put it this way, very philosophically and metaphorically. So when you have a physical aspect to an interaction, you're talking to people and you're making sense of it, okay? So today, if you have to open, baking store, you want to have like baking goods for, let's say, 20 to 40-year-olds, that's your market. You are going to stand out on the street and try out a little bit before you go completely bonkers, right? But think of it 15 years from now. I look at my 5-year-old cousins and nephews now. When they are 20, I don't think I'll get them standing on the streets, because the streets will be full of autonomous vehicles, they'll be inside, and they'll be all on digital forums. I'm not going to be able to get them on the streets, right? So how will you sell to them then at that time? You will have to look into their data and signature, and what's the data footprint of these people, because there is no other way to sell to them or make them. You don't have any physical contact. So the more we're getting into a digital world, the more it makes sense to analyze data, to do anything with anyone. And Gyana is kind of a first step. I think in that respect, we're quite visionaries that we've kind of taken the first step. A lot of big companies have taken that first step because they already have many technologies and they're combining them and making sense. But we are probably the first small players who said we will start with combination itself because the data already exists. So I'm going to take all of that and make sense of it. That's what Gyana is saying.
So we've talked about how you're going to need to access people's data in the future because you're not going to be able to get out on the street. People's desire for privacy is a big block to that. How do you think that's going to impact the image you're building 20 years down the line?
Absolutely. I think that's a very fair question because I worry about it too, I don't want everyone to know everything about me. But here's the sad fact. I don't even have to share it. I leave digital signatures in everything and it's already out there, If you look at, if you have a friend who's active on social media, look at her profile for 2 years. You almost know everything about her personality and her behavior. Mm-hmm. She's already living it, and that's voluntarily living it. Now let's say something else, her transaction patterns. If she's using credit cards, you already know if, every month going and buying, 5 bottles of vodka only on a Friday evening. And you begin to see patterns, right? So basically, the unfortunate truth is we don't have to share data willingly or give our personal details. Even indirectly, we are leaving behind so much because we are almost like digital avatars moving around in a digitized world. So we are leaving them. It's good and bad. Good because I think things become more personalized. You don't want to be hit by grandmother's shoes that you're not going to buy for the next 40 years, you know. Think of the salesman who used to come up to our parents' doors long back selling annoying things you never want. But the bad thing is, of course, you feel a loss of privacy. I think there is middle ground to that, in the sense that if you are ethically very committed to having things anonymized and not have them trickle down to the individual's whereabouts and their names, or if they're not willing to maybe reveal their genders, actually kind of abstract it and cap it off within the technology itself. So beyond that point, you don't get insights, but you kind of use the rest of it to make sense. I think it can be done. I don't necessarily think regulation will get us there, because they neither comprehend nor are they that advanced right now. I think what will get us there is ethical organizations full of diverse, broad-minded millennials and liberal individuals who are driving these strategies. And that's the kind of culture we want to set, that, from inside out, even without regulations, even without anything imposed, we are ourselves ethical and diverse, that we know that there are some things you can do and there are some things you will not do, even if it makes better sales.
Isn't that always the case, that change comes from business and not the government?
Absolutely. And I think that although we've said it for a long time, we've not really seen that happen. But now I think it will. I think, look at it. The French president just appointed a millennial entrepreneur as the digital minister. I mean, we're looking at changes right now. So I'm hopeful in the next 10 years.
They're starting to catch up.
Yes.
Although GDPR is quite empowering in that it's changing data ownership slightly, as in the data is owned by the individual and not the company. So even if you are leaving data behind, if a company's collecting it, it's yours and you're allowed to take it away, ask them to delete it, report it.
I think that's brilliant. I think that level of control empowers you to feel that you still retain control over what you share, what you don't. I think that's really quite brilliant. I think that loosens up people. Actually, it makes development of technology easier, because when you're trying to push against this wall and bulldoze on top of people's volition, like, oh no, you know what, I'm just going to make these freewheeling cars everywhere, I don't care what you think about the taxi associations. It does eventually catch up, if you know what I mean. It does catch up. I think that this is great that people retain that element of control, and they're able to feel that, they're willing participants. For technologies like ours, I love that, because I would rather have people feel that we're enablers to a power they already hold, rather than, we're just not cool people, we're just going to do this anyway, I don't care if you like it or not. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest barrier you've faced?
Quite a few. I think, well, first of all, I don't know, navigating the UK funding scene was a bit of a challenge. It's slightly different from many other places. So that, then I found another big challenge is something that I still face till date and time, is hiring enough women in a high-tech organization that is early stage. First of all, I get very few female techies interested in the first place. Even if they are, the whole infrastructure and the socioeconomic construct is such that they end up going for bigger players where the careers are safe. So I don't know if their families, partners, they kind of encourage them to move more towards stability, even at a very younger age, as opposed to what you would ask a man of the same age to do. So encouraging them to experiment or go for adventure so less has resulted in very low number of women going into very high-tech, disruptive, early-stage organizations. I just barely see them. So first of all, STEM graduates themselves, as we know, we have this whole issue of having less number of women as opposed to men. But even if you have them, if they end up all going to only Microsoft and Google and everything, there's nothing left for high-tech startups. So if you walk into a very high-tech startup, you'll mostly see men walking around. I'm really trying hard to change that, but it's very hard because no one even applies. And we live in such a fast scenario with low buffer time for decision making. I cannot endlessly keep on waiting and encouraging, so I end up filling positions, and I just keep on asking women, apply, please apply. We have marketing roles, we have tech roles, we have operations roles. Do something that you like, you know. I'm even willing to support them when they come on board and work through them if they haven't already had that exposure. But very few takers, and that is a huge challenge because not having enough diversity, I know, having been on the other side of it, is not great for an organization. It's not great for us too, so I would like to have that. Then the third challenge is, I think, so I came to UK about 4 or 5 years ago. I have lived here shortly on and off before that, but that's the time I just really moved. So there's a bunch of other extra issues that I navigate compared to other entrepreneurs that, you know, place me in a position where in every small task I end up spending more time than others. You know, I have to account for that time. But that's when somebody judges the performance of my business, they don't account for that. They will kind of look at it with the exact same yardstick as someone else. Okay, what's the ramp up? What's this curve? What's that? But they will not account for it. In a way, I think that's fair too, because if they account for it, then they will not be able to, I guess, make as much ROI as they're thinking of. But it does feel a bit unfair because in the end you want to back a capable person, right? So
going back to what you were saying about the struggle of hiring more women, we read a lot of articles and people make broad statements about, you know, how there is this inequality and it's a problem and this needs to change in the long run. But what can people actually do on a day-to-day basis? Like, you know, when you put out a job description and you get 10 men applying, how do we change that?
It's really hard. What I'm trying to do, and these are just things that come on the top of my head and I don't even know if I'm right or wrong, but what I try to do, I do speak to as many females as I can through my circle and my network and even forums, and post there and say, and specifically give it a little extra time to see if they would respond before I go anywhere else. Like, you know, do you know someone? Do you have someone in this forum? Is there anybody who's willing to do it? The other day I needed a certain position which could be a person that can work from home 2 days a week, and that'll still be fine for the role. So I actually went and posted in a forum where there's a bunch of new moms who want to work from home a few days a week, and I asked, like, if any of you want to take it. So I think this desire has to exist among people who are posting roles or encouraging things, that we will make this extra effort to include them. It is an extra effort, I have to say, in a busy schedule. Making that extra effort for one role, it's a lot. But we will have to do it if we want to give it a chance. And the results are disappointing. I still don't get like a drastically different result. So if we want like a result the moment we put in effort and then give up because it didn't work, then it's not going to work. But I think if we repeatedly, consistently do it, some will show up. And when you have a little bit, they will be an example to a larger group, and, you know, it'll happen.
And what about, say, not in your own company, but there's... you're in a different company which is full of men and men hiring other men, and you want to make a change, but as a junior employee,
I was there.
How do you make a change in a business like that when you're not actually doing the employing and the job interviews?
So, well, I have a sad and a happy story there. So in one such organization, I actually eventually left because I couldn't, because I was a junior employee. I wanted to create change, but so my only options were try and do it very subtly without hurting anyone's ego, and eventually when, you know, I cross that level of patience, then I'm just this audacious young person, basically. So eventually that job didn't work out for me. That happened. I saw like this. The problem is it's very subtle. It's not like someone decides that if a woman walks through the store, I'm not going to hire her, or in my case, I'd say I'm not going to invest in her. It's not how they think. If someone thinks like that, you can actually work with it, because the elephant already exists. It's in the room, it's addressed, and now you can work around it. The problem is a lot of people are very convinced that they do not have this issue. They're like, no, I'm judging both these things, both this man's application and this woman's application in the exact same way. I don't see how I'm, you know, applying any kind of bias. But that isn't true. The bias is very subtle and they're not aware of their own bias. And those are very hard to change, because when you have a conversation, they go like, what are you talking about? Me? No way. And that is right now the majority. They're just convinced that they have absolutely no bias. But if you just do this thought experiment with them, if they're willing to do it neutrally, I just go, okay, let me just replace this person's head and body by, let's say that guy standing there, okay? Let's just put his head on this person. Let's just imagine it, okay? Are you speaking the exact same way? Are you thinking the exact same way? Did you ask the exact same questions? If you find yourself saying no, and then you're trying to justify, forget the justification. If it's no, you haven't really treated them the exact same way. Most people aren't willing to do that experiment, or if they do it, they don't apply it well enough, or they're not willing to answer truthfully. But those who do, they end up realizing that that is very true.
In the early stages, you can do something similar, although with less beheading. Perhaps applications could be anonymous.
Yeah.
As in,
yeah,
whoever received the CVs, take some names out.
Absolutely, and not necessarily make it absolutely mandatory for genders to be included. That would be great, I think. But also overall, I think that we have to propagate this culture where, we encourage women to be as much adventurous and experimental as men. So like the other day I was speaking to this brother and sister duo. I think the girl's 23 and the guy was 26, and they were both talking to me. Now the guy is going on a long backpacking trip around the world for a year or something, which is very exciting. And I thought that his family was so supportive and talking about, how he must do that and it's going to add to his life's experiences. And I so agree. The girl's 23, and I think she's gone through 2 boyfriends in 1 year, as it often happens in those ages. It happened to me, to all of us. And I heard already her family saying stuff like, you got to get a grip on reality. What are you doing? So even at 23, she's expected to be stable and make great choices. But he's 26 and he goes backpacking around the world. That's amazing. They're like a very well good educated family. They're not necessarily not exposed to international truths or anything, but this is subtle. They're not realizing what they're doing. They're telling the girl that she should have already known what she wanted at that age, and what they're effectively telling the guys, it's great you don't know. This is what's stopping them to go out and experiment in future. It's systematic, it's conditional, because when she's 30, she is going to apply to a very stable big job. If a high-tech company advertises like ours, she's not going to go for it, because for 10 years she's been conditioned to think her choices need to be stable. Now, you can't be adventurous and be stable at the exact same time. There's a time for everything. We've got to give women that exact window that we give to men as well, to experiment and figure out. And if you go wrong a couple of times, that's great.
So do you think that there's change happening? Do you see anything that's shifting? Do you think this is the beginning of maybe seeing more women going to STEM fields? Or
I hope so. I think change is happening. So the interesting thing I've seen is changes happening from not just women, but a lot of men have also become very supportive, especially in the younger millennials. They're beginning to speak for their friends and counterparts, which I think is great. They're beginning to explore what it's like to be on the other side. That is really great. When I speak to a 20-year-old person now, as opposed to when I was 20 some time ago and I had friends, that guy speaks very differently on an average. That for me is great, because I may not see it while I'm in this tenure, but maybe my kids will see that. I definitely have that hope, yeah.
Empathy is really something that's so undervalued in the workplace, and I'm happy to hear that it's sounding like it's making its way up.
It is
the generations.
Definitely. I don't know where that's coming from though, because a lot of generations, the younger millennials were showing that much empathy or interest. They've not necessarily gone through a lot of tragedies themselves. If you look at the timelines, we've actually been very stable compared to, But I don't know, somewhere maybe collective wisdom of humanity passing on, or something's happening that they're waking up to it, which is great.
A lot of the value that people talk about women bringing is that level of empathy. It's a very natural thing to women.
Yes.
But you're saying that women need to be a bit more daring and a bit more risk-taking to jump into a job in a tech startup.
Yeah.
Is that at odds, the empathetic, caring person and the daring, adventurous spirit?
Yes. That's what I kind of feel, that women are probably valuable because they're able to do both if they want to. They can be terribly bold and courageous, and they can make very holistic decisions as well. And that is what they bring to an organization. And I won't say all, because of course it's a whole spectrum, different kinds. But on an average, if I combine the thousands of interactions I've had with, let's say, leaders of the exact same rank, being both males and females, I have noticed that women bring a little holistic component to their decision making. They're able to see a little bit beyond just exactly what is in the box, the context to the box. And I think that they're beginning to bring it to the men as well, who are beginning to think that way. Maybe that's what is impacting the millennials. So I don't think it's at odds. I think we balance it well. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's also the beauty of the two genders. We're supposed to help each other bring out the best in.
Yes. And that's the value of diversity.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's not just a tool or a hogwash thing about, hey, let's just talk about diversity, put a few props in a meeting, as many people are doing. And I see that too. Completely fake diversity, which is just, for this annual meeting, let's just get some diversity in. And it happens, believe me. I do think genuinely that it is a great tool, because diversity is variety of thought. And that, I can guarantee you, is very powerful. So I had a nonprofit that I built and scaled a couple of years ago. And in that nonprofit, the sole mode of, the main USP, the biggest reason it's a success is because we would bring together people to solve different social situations. And the people who would be brought together would be very different. Okay, so we would pair up a housewife who's never worked for 35 years of her life with a scientist who works in a radio station. Okay, we brought a mathematician with a novelist, or someone who writes his romances. So we would bring very different people, and it's so powerful because together they see everything. They see the art side, they see this side and that side, and they solve the problem. And yes, they argue, and yes, they disagree. But as a leader, if you're able to encourage confrontation, professional confrontation as a creative thing to grow together and not get in the way of you getting a beer together on Friday evening, no matter how much you argued in the day, then you've built a culture where diversity is an absolute asset. And I think that companies need to benefit. If you look at the unilateral decisions they're making and how damaging they are to the world, it's because there is no holistic thinking inside.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for today.
If you have an interesting perspective or insight you'd like to share, do get in touch to feature.
Or get in touch to give feedback, or just to chat.
Our email is charge@develop.co.uk.
Subscribe to Charge to be notified when our next episode is released.
Next time, we'll be speaking to Alberto Chierici from Spixie, and we'll be returning to the topic of InsurTech, this time with an AI angle. See you then.